Welcome to episode 117 of The Route presented by White Whale Marketing. The Route is a glorified sports business coffee chat that has a new guest every episode as we share their experiences and route in sports. As always, I'm Christopher Nascimento, and let's get started. Before we get into today's guest, just a couple quick things to cover. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast on social media. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see it here in the top corner. It says at The Route Sports. That's our handle on every single channel, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, probably something else, but it's all there. So check us out there. We'll be posting when the episodes come out who the guest is. You can see the unique magazine covers we make for each guest. And we're also doing clips. So every single day there's a clip coming from a previous episode. So check that out so you can get those snippets and get a little teaser for our episodes. Building on that as well, if you haven't already, before we get into today's guest, take the time to subscribe, follow the podcast on whatever platform you're listening. We're on all the major audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon. So check us out there. And if you want to watch us via video, you can check us out at the White Whale Marketing YouTube channel. We have the route playlist there. So check us out. With that said, we just have a quick message from our friends at Bedstand, and we can kind of get into today's episode.
Damn it, I lost another bet. I always do this. Why can't I win at least one?
Need an edge in sports betting.
BetStamp allows you to compare the best available odds among sports books. To get an edge in sports betting, download the BetStamp app and use the code WHALE to get access to all the affiliates and pricing. The only way to get an edge in online sports betting is by having accounts with multiple sports books.
Yes.
BetStamp.
I'd now like to welcome someone who has experience in media, pro sports, and now university athletics. Manager of Partnerships and Communications at Queen's Athletics and Recreation, Christopher Lund. Welcome to The Route. How's it going?
Good. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks for joining me. I've said this to a few guests that we've had. I don't think I've ever met a Chris I don't like. So
yeah, easy to remember at the very least.
Yeah. So yeah, we've had good experiences with Chris in the past. So we can kind of continue that trend going with today's episode. But yeah, the way I like to start every single episode is just take us through your route. So where did it begin, and how did we get to the position you're in today with Queens?
Yeah, it's I think it was an interesting. I knew from a young age I was never going to be a professional athlete. So I knew working in sport was always going to be something I wanted to do, even if I wasn't going to be competing. And I think the way it kind of took shape, I remember being in high school, and I'll shout out an old teacher of mine, Mr. Frank Trenadu. I took a class, and I think it was grade 12 with him, called the Writer's Craft, where it was basically just exploring different forms of writing over the course of the year. And he said after a couple assignments, this is something you should probably consider doing for a living. You've got a bit of a flair for it. And I was 16, 17 at the time, didn't think much of it, but it did kind of stick in the background a little bit. And, I got to university. I went to Queen's University here in Kingston, where I work today. And I thought I wanted to be a lawyer because I thought that would be kind of my most direct path to working in sports. So I did a degree in philosophy because that teaches you how to think, teaches you how to argue, teaches you how to write with some concision. And while I was here studying, I started a sports blog with a friend of mine, Matt, from high school, called Always OUA. And we both really liked going out to varsity sport while we were in school. He was at the University of Waterloo, and I was in Kingston at Queen's. So basically, he would cover the west end of the province. I would cover the east end of the province. We thought it was an undercovered kind of space in the media landscape. It still probably is, to be honest with you. But we started doing that and developed a bit of a following. That's when blogs were kind of the main go-to, digital media format. And in doing that, we actually got the opportunity to work freelance with The Score back when that was a TV station and a mobile app, because they had the broadcast rights to see what was then CIS football on Saturdays. So we would do like weekend previews for them, write some features. We write about the top 10 list every week and so on and so forth. And following that, I kind of started getting the bug that maybe this is something I want to do professionally. And I spent a lot of the time in my back half of university finding people I looked up to and sending emails basically saying, how do I get your job? So that was really insightful. I had a lot of people get back to me and give really earnest and positive feedback. And that kind of guided a lot of my thinking. And one person that got back to me was a gentleman by the name of John Grigg, who at the time was an editor at the Hockey News magazine, and told me about their internship program. So I went through that process, applied there, and actually did an internship there the summer of 2011. I remember that. I think that was the year the Bruins won the Stanley Cup, and that was the first kind of bits of things that we worked on while I was there. And at that point, when you're in that type of environment and you're on the phone getting the chance to interview people you've kind of watched growing up and stuff like that, you really kind of get hooked. So I knew I wanted to just double down on sports. And after that, I did a really silly thing where I worked at the Score in their offices in Toronto. They had the newsroom there. It was at King and Blue Jays Way, and I also took a job in Kingston, working for the athletic department at Queens. So I would basically work both. I would work both at the same time. And so basically I'd work at Queens from say 8 or 9 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. I'd hop on the train or the bus, go to Toronto, work the night shift at the Score. And I do that several times a week. And, that was very silly, bad for my health. But it was really educational because I got a sense of how to operate in kind of different environments where the Score at the time was this kind of like young, fresh media company, and a lot of the talent there has gone to do great things elsewhere. And I also kind of got a sense of the kind of more formal university landscape, which is closer to traditional team side sports. We have 39 teams here at Queens, and that's how many we had at the time. So, having to juggle that many teams on top of the other stuff you're responsible to, and then doing that other stuff on the side, it was a really interesting time, and I don't think I've slept well since. But and while that was going on, I was doing some freelance stuff on the side, either very low money or for free, just to rack up kind of bylines and build the profile out a little bit, portfolio I should say. And after a year of kind of doing that juggling act, I went back and I decided, I'm from Mississauga originally, so I wanted to be a bit closer to home. So I said, okay, I'll just do the Score going forward, and did that for a while. And we kind of had some shuffling. That was when the Score was sold to Rogers, and they kind of split the company, and that became Sportsnet 360. And then the Score stayed itself as a digital entity with the app and the website and all that, which is very successful today. And, as part of that kind of schism, we got a lot of exposure to kind of trying different things at that company. So that's when I got more introduced to social media, taking a greater role in that type of thing. And that served me really well because that was when the NHL lockout happened. So that was the fall of 2012. And teams all over the league, not all of them have very secure revenue if they're not playing games. So they had to lay off a lot of their staff, and some of the staff decided, I'm not going to risk coming back. We just did a full year lockout. I can't wait for that. And that opened up an opportunity with the Ottawa Senators, which I kind of went through the process for, and was lucky enough to be selected to be I was there. I think my title was content producer, which is a bit of a broad catch-all. Basically, I was responsible for anything on the website, social media, pretty much any sort of content that wasn't, video, was in my domain, video and photo. So, thanks to Brian Morris and Chris Moore with the Sens PR team for hiring me there. And I was there for, I think, just under 2 years. So it was a great time, like amazing to be kind of introduced to that NHL environment and find out what it takes to work at that level. That was the summer of the pesky Sens, where we beat the Habs in the first round of the playoffs in 5 games, and then I think we lost in five or six to the Penguins the next round. And it was just a fascinating time because that was the summer Daniel Alfredson left and Bobby Ryan came in the trade and Jason Spezza got named captain and Erik Karlsson had his Achilles injury and it was just one thing after the other. It was the most chaotic year I think I've ever witnessed in sport. So I was there for just under 2 years, and then one day I kind of got a call from Matt Iaboni, who at the time was the community manager for the Toronto Maple Leafs, who basically just said, would you think about coming over to work for us? And that was awesome. And it was a really difficult decision because so much of the Sens content world at the time had kind of been my baby, where Twitter was only a few years old. Like they'd done Facebook a little bit. We invented the Instagram page, all these kind of things that were foundational to what they do now, and fans kind of look at now and see as this is just what they do. Like that didn't exist before a certain year. So so it was tough to say goodbye to that. But I grew up a Leaf fan and grew up in the GTA. So I didn't think they'd call twice. So I had to pull the trigger and do that. And so November 2014, I went back to the Leafs, which was really exciting. It was another kind of year of change there. So that was, I think, 3 or 4 weeks into my job, they let Randy Carlyle go, and then that kind of started the rebuild that underwent that the organization took there. So I did that job through. I think the last event I remember working in that job was the 2016 NHL draft. So Austin Matthews first overall. So a couple tough seasons in the meantime. You don't get the first overall pick for winning most nights, but it was a great time. It was really interesting, just again to kind of take a similar work experience to what I'd done in Ottawa and just do it on a much bigger scale. Might not be the right word, but just in a bigger organization. MLSE is obviously a much larger operation than the Ottawa Senator Hockey Club. And that being said, if you do digital content for a living, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are going to watch this who think that they want to do social for a pro team at some point. It is a grind, and there is a shelf life to doing that job. So I was coming up on 5 years of doing that job, and I don't know many people that have lasted more than 5 years. A couple war horses have survived, but coming out after that draft, I kind of knew I wanted to stay in the organization, but maybe find a different fit. And as luck would have it, the Leafs PR team was adding a member to their group, just looking at the league, and had the opportunity to go through that, and I'd obviously worked very closely with them and knew a lot about what their operations were and day-to-day look like, and thought it might be a nice transition to get away from having to tweet and do Instagram posts and all that all the time, and be more behind the scenes rather than a public personality, which at the time was a bit of one. So yeah, and that worked out, and got to work in the Leafs PR team for just about 5 years, I think. Because I would have done August 2016. I would have come in there September 2021. I left social August or September 2020 or 2016, and then eventually left in 2021, summer 2021. So it was just an amazing experience to be kind of embedded with just such a great group of people. It's a top class organization, and shout out to Steve Keogh, Scott McNaughton, Colin McBride, the Leafs PR crew I got to work with for the bulk of my time there. Just the absolute best people, and great friends and great memories there, and just being in that kind of situation every day was really, you learn a lot, and you work with a lot of really interesting people, and try and find some new ways to do things. So it was an incredible experience, and something I'll keep with me forever. But like anything, you do kind of get to a point where you decide, maybe you want to take on a new challenge. And as luck would have it, my alma mater was kind of going through a marketing restructure coming out of COVID, and had the opportunity kind of presented to me to come back and try and help the project here. And yeah, things just kind of worked out. So now I'm in marketing communications here, and it's a wide ranging job, 39 teams. Our gym has 30,000 people in it every day across campus and the community. Lots of things to write about, talk about, promote on any given day. So it's a great place and great team that I inherited here. And yeah, it's every day is a bit of an adventure.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. There's so many different things I already want to kind of get into, right? Where the ups and downs, and when you're saying the thing about doing social for a pro team, I did it for one season for the soccer team in Ottawa, and just live tweeting during the game. And I also did the communications where as soon as it was halftime, I would have to go send stuff to all the local media, and it was killer. Like, just the amount of things you had to do where it was nonstop, right? It's a 24/7 job, because sure, you had your scheduled posts, but then anything could happen. A trade, a transaction, some type of statement would come out, and yeah, there's definitely a shelf life for that. So that made me chuckle. But what I kind of like doing is kind of going all the way back to the beginning, and then we'll work our way back if that's all right.
Sure.
At the beginning, you were kind of mentioning that teacher you had in grade 12 and how much that impacted you. Is that something, like, I think you touched on it a tad, but prior to that conversation, did that ever like cross your mind, or did that really, like, when it came time to decide, hey, like, where am I going to go to school after high school, did that like come to mind, or was it always along those lines of writing or law?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like I've at the end of the day, looking back, I wish I could get in a time machine and have a conversation with myself, because I was just a kid, right? Like, I didn't know anything. But I do think, just having someone who, I trusted and respected and admired, kind of go out of their way to say, like, you kind of have something here. It wasn't necessarily a compass, but was kind of operating in the background when I made some decisions. Just thinking even to when I thought about my hobbies and start writing, like, that's not necessarily, now it's more likely I would start an Instagram page and cover these things, right? But I knew I'd kind of had this vote of confidence in my writing. When I chose my education, I picked I was philosophy and English, which don't exactly scream like automatic career, but the common thread there is thinking and writing and arguing, for a point of view. So I always I was probably guilty when I was younger of being a bit too deferential when it came to thinking about what I wanted to do for a living, because I always had this sports dream. But my parents were extremely supportive, and God bless them for that. But when you talk about that with other people and more mixed company, it's kind of like, yeah, but like, what are you actually going to do? So just to kind of have someone give you like a foundational layer to kind of work from. And I dabbled in a bunch of stuff. I even think back to high school. Like, I'm terrible at math and science, but I remember being in grade 11 being told engineering was the way to go, and taking like physics and chemistry and all that, and I was just absolutely garbage at it, and absolutely tanked my grades that year. But I had to try it and fail and go from there. And I just kept coming back to this one thing, which was kind of put in my head by a teacher who was just trying to pass along some constructive praise, I guess, is the best way to put it. So I always defaulted to something that was a bit more out of the box, obvious, hence trying to optimize for law. But at the end of the day, just kind of following my gut and following my skill set led me to the destination. I mean, I got to work for my favorite hockey team for 7 years. So, following that kind of gut and that advice got me where I wanted to be at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, that's funny enough, just because I remember, I feel like I've seen a study before where it talked about like they did a study on like young children kind of providing, hey, reassurance that, hey, you're smart in this, and they would go on doing a career in that, right? And how much that ends up impacting you, right? And it's just so impactful, right? When someone just says, "Hey, like you're good at this," you're like, "Oh, you know what? I am good at this," and then like that's something kind of sticks in the back of your mind. Where, I had two of my science teachers in high school. They're like, "You're horrible at science," or they would say something like that to me. And science has never been my thing ever since. I hate science. That want nothing to do with it. So it's funny how impactful essentially these teachers can be on the rest of your life to an extent. Um,
Absolutely.
and then building on that as well, I find it's kind of a common theme, right, with the guests we have, and maybe just people as a whole. When you kind of go to school, there's always one thing in mind, and then maybe kind of figure things out. You learn a bit more about yourself, and then you hit that fork in the road. Do you continue with that path you initially started, or do you then go chase that gut feeling, that passion, or anything like that? And I kind of want to dive into that a bit further because a lot of the people that listen are probably a bit younger, in the university type age or young professional, and maybe they're kind of going through a similar process like that. You might be walking us through of what gave you that confidence, or what specifically about that gut feeling was like, hey, you know what, let me look into this a bit further.
Yeah, I think it was just, really boiled down to where things were happening for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I I remember being in kind of the later stages of my university career and studying for the LSAT and kind of doing all that, thinking like, well, I've come this far, I may as well see it through. But
Mm-hmm.
that kind of writing, blogging, social media side, just things just kept. I just seemed to keep getting opportunities and calls, and I said yes to everything because I wanted to do everything, and I'm a people pleaser, so realistically, I'm probably saying yes to everything so I can send it off to my parents and be like, oh, look at how productive I'm being. But um, I think I just owed it to myself to. I think not that I ever verbalized it like that. I don't have a journal I can go back to, but I think I just felt like I owed it to myself to kind of see it through, and just because it seemed so serendipitous that all these things were happening with, just knowing that I could always go back, and if it all fell apart, I could always go back and, try and become a lawyer or try and do something else, right? Like I could do it now if I wanted to.
Yeah.
But I just, I thought that I just kept having people show belief in me and my abilities, and I wanted to do it justice without second guessing myself and trying to do the more conventional path.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess kind of going back to that opportunity that kept arising, you were talking about that blog you started with your friend, Always OUA. Is that something where you look back on where, that seems to be like a lot of themes now where people are starting blogs or social media pages. Was that ever something where, I know you said you started working with the score, that's something that you ever had in the back of your mind of, oh, hey, like it would have been cool to kind of continue that? Or was it something like more of a stepping stone?
I don't really know that I saw it as either, to be honest. I think it's just, if I think back to, and I could be misremembering, like who knows?
Yeah.
It's been 14 years now, I think. Um, but for me, it was really just about like, let's just do something for fun. Like we both were, we talk about all these games we went to on the weekend. And, we'd look elsewhere for insights and analysis, and there was never anything. So, we kind of just decided to scratch our own itch and start our own websites. And I don't think either of us foresaw it gaining a following or getting any opportunity from it. It was just something we wanted to do and have fun with. Matt is a teacher now, and probably hasn't written a sports article in a decade, I'm willing to bet. So I'll have to ask him after I hop off here. But it was just something we kind of did because we thought we would like to have that. So there's probably someone else somewhere who'd like to have that, and it was correct. We did have a pretty good sized audience, and we got a lot of emails and comments from people, and it was we never really did it for the numbers, but it was always kind of reassuring, when you think you've done a good job on an article, and you can see 1,800 people came to read this. It was neat, and the opportunities that arose out of it for both of us was just kind of gravy, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. And if we can kind of expand on that a bit too, is that something where maybe even now looking back on it, maybe like young people coming up, is that something where like I like myself, I got a website for free from one of my courses, and then just kind of doing some of the deliverables for the course, like writing a blog, doing some social media posts, and I started running with it. And I found almost the when you weren't thinking, you're just doing this, you're like, oh, I want to try this out, or hey, I kind of enjoy doing this. End up learning so much more than I would have at at a potential job because you're literally trial by fire. Is that something where you kind of learned a lot and kind of got a lot of that experience of hey, like this is an avenue kind of thing I can fit into?
Absolutely. I think it's, I'm definitely guilty of this from time to time where like if I was left to my own devices, I would read a million articles and other things on like how to do X, like how to optimize your time, get more done, whatever.
Yeah.
But ultimately I think the greatest reward usually comes from just sitting down and doing it. And I know for myself, I always kind of I enjoyed writing in my free time, and which was ironic because I never felt like I had time to write all the essays and stuff I had to do. But you know, it was one of those things where it was just an extra, kind of vehicle for me. And I do think that there is. I think that it's really easy to get hung up on. I don't know if perfectionism is the right word, but like wanting something to be like perfectly manicured before it gets out into the world. And you see it a lot with people that say do social media. They want to do social for whatever career avenue, and they spend a lot of time on their own page, hiring photographers, carefully manicuring things. And I can tell you from doing the job in a few different places, like 9 times out of 10, the thing that's timely and just hits with somebody is gonna do even better than you think the carefully the carefully curated graphic is gonna be. So I think there is something to be said for just kind of sitting down and scratching your own itch and just doing it. And it doesn't have to be for anybody. You don't have to put your name on it. You don't have to publicize it. You don't have to do anything. You can just start writing away. And if it's up, it's up. Someone might find it, they might not, but it's an opportunity to improve, and refine your thinking, refine your craft. And yeah, so if anybody's listening to this and sitting on the fence thinking like, I don't know if I'm going to do this. I don't know if I'd be good enough. I don't do this. I don't. You're probably not, but
Yeah.
you get enough reps in. It's like lifting a weight. You can't walk into a gym having never been before, expect to bench 425. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think you just gotta, at some point, even if it's for nobody, just take some time, put in the work, and you're going to see the benefit manifest one way or the other.
Oh, I 100% agree with that completely, right? Whether it's this podcast or anything else that I've kind of been doing, kind of almost, I wouldn't say going in it blind, but just, hey, you know what? Let me just get the first one out and you're going to improve every single time. Where now I don't even want to listen to episode 0 or 1 because it's awful. Because I had all these scheduled questions. I was force feeding everything. And, I wouldn't have learned unless I did it, right?
Yeah,
Once the camera's
exactly.
on, once you record and put it out, then you're like, oh, okay, maybe this needs to be improved. That needs to be improved. So I definitely agree with that full heartedly where, just kind of getting it done and being timely and relevant is so much more important where, I think sometimes in sports too, I think you were touching on it a bit. Um, they're kind of hammer away trying to find all the different details. Whereas, one of the examples we've had, we were working an athlete came up to us and he was like, hey, can you do NFTs? Like, we have no idea what an NFT is. And this was like a year or two ago. We learned how to do an NFT, wrote blogs so people would know how to use them or look at them. And we launched it within a week. And then, the league was like, hey, what are you doing? Like, we wanted to do this, but then they never end up doing because they're this huge process of kind of approval and going about it. But then
Yeah.
by the time they were about to do it, it was essentially dead. Right. So I fully agree with that. And I guess kind of moving on the subject of continuing with doing and just trying it out. You're mentioning for that hockey news position, right? You're just emailing people or contacting them. Hey, how do I get your job? I think that's like a great piece of advice. Maybe like tip is like just squeaky wheel gets the oil essentially, right? Where if you don't ask, you don't get. So is that how you kind of started developing your network, or was that something that you just tried once you wanted a position?
Um, I don't know that I used it to develop my network. I don't know if I'm very good at networking in general. If I'm being honest, it's still probably something I can improve on. But for me, it was basically, I made a list of people I admired and whose work I admired and whose careers I thought were interesting,
Mhm.
and I drafted an email to them and basically said like, "Hi, here's what I'm writing you today. Here's my deal. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but basically, like, I want to know how to be you." So it was amazing how many people got back to me. A few didn't. I still remember who they are, and we've since crossed paths. But not that I've shared that with them. I'll let them think about what they did. But it was just I was really struck by how willing people were to share and offer their advice, and the one kind of consistent thread that came up time and again was, I did this once, and this person talked to me, this person talked to me, this person talked to me, and now I try to do as much of that as possible. I don't get it as much now in my job. I got it a bit more when my employer was a bit more glamorous, but just trying to pay it forward, and that's something I would encourage everybody to do. If there's someone that you look up to and respect, the world has never been more accessible. All of your idols are, you can spend 15 minutes on Google and find their email, find their voicemail, find something, and get in touch with them. And as long as you put yourself out there in an earnest way, I think you're going to get a response. I think sometimes where people get hung up now a bit is it can come off as a little it's a bit more transactional. But I think if you come at it from an earnest place and just trying to help inform your decision making or your thinking or your approach, more often than not, people are going to respond to you and help you out.
For sure. That almost sounds like the route before the route, right? Where this idea essentially came when I was finishing up school, and I was like, hey, like, how can I meet with people that aren't in Ottawa, or just kind of learn from their career? And it kind of sounds fairly similar, where I think it's a great way to just kind of learn from people's previous experiences and then just kind of hopefully build on it, right? That's what we were touching on beforehand.
Oh yeah, I would have devoured this podcast back in the day. So
yeah, that's good to hear. Like that was my thought process. I'm like, what would 18-year-old Chris want to be hearing? Because as I said to you beforehand, I was Googling, how to get a job in sports, work in sports, and I still remember the Google search bar. There's nothing, right? It was, hey, apply via Indeed or this, that, and the other. And I was like, hey, that's not good enough. I need a better career path or route. So I definitely agree with that. And I guess then building on that as well, I kind of wanted to touch on your experience with Kingston and Toronto within the same day, going back and forth. What was I don't know, you said that was not good for your mental health and your sleep, but it almost doesn't sound feasible to an extent.
It probably wasn't. I'll be honest, I don't know how I did it. I think it was just literally steel will, thinking this is going to get me where I want to go.
Yeah.
And I didn't think about it much. I just this is my situation. This is what I've done to myself. So we're just going to power through and get it done. And there was some other stuff on the go too. I was also the sports director at the radio station here in town. So I traveled cover our football games on Saturdays and do the radio broadcast. So, I know my dad still holds some grudges over Thanksgiving we spent at Windsor for a Queens Windsor game because that was on the stops. And, there was I just said yes to everything, is really what it boiled down to. And then I just kind of accepted that I've said yes to this. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it properly or to the best of my abilities. And, some of my friends still roast me for this, but it was just, I didn't know any other way outside of just saying yes and throwing myself into it. And I don't necessarily recommend it, but it was a great learning opportunity. I kind of figured out how to operate as a very tired person, and I learned how to do a really good job juggling a million different things on no time, no free time. Pretty much every minute I had was spent doing something that would have my name on it, whether it was, at one of the two jobs or one of the places I was freelancing for. My travel time I spent on my laptop more often than not. Occasionally I'd sneak in a nap, but it was very silly. It was a very silly thing to do, but I'm grateful for it because I kind of proved to myself that I could power through it. And, I think I got a much better sense of my limit and what I was capable of by doing that, which, not a lot of people get, particularly in a professional context, because, most of us get thrust into 9-to-5 kind of jobs when, sports don't work that way. It's evenings and weekends, the deal. So, I think it was a really good really good test run, and definitely prepared me for, the rigors of what was waiting for me around the bend.
Yeah, and I'm sure that time period alone, whether it's, I'm sure that probably helped in some manner to kind of get those next jobs that you had coming, because it just showed that, initiative or self drive that you had, because essentially no one was really forcing you to do it, but you were kind of doing it on your own just to get that experience and kind of get your name out there. So, like, it makes a lot of sense. Just it's still just crazy kind of thinking about just
It
taking the
was,
train forward. Would
yeah.
you what? So I know you said you worked at Queens in the morning. You take the train to Toronto. Would you go sleep in Toronto and then take the train in the morning to Kingston?
It would depend when sports ended that day. So if there were no late night games, so like say there's no like Lakers Kings
Yeah.
on the West Coast at 10:30, and the schedule was mostly wrapped up by 11:30. They didn't know this, but I try to dip out early and catch the bus back to Kingston at midnight. If there was a really late slate of games, so like your Kings Lakers 10:30 goes to overtime, wraps up at 1:30, I would usually have a nap at my desk and then take this 5 a.m. bus back to Kingston and then have a shower and then go back to work here. So it was, it was absurd. But, I think, I don't know. It was just, it's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous to think about. But, I think I'll be honest, like, I think I didn't want to have any question about my work ethic and what I was willing to do, if I'm being honest, because I know, particularly growing up, like school and stuff always came pretty easy to me. And not that I did the best, but that's because I didn't put in the work. Like I just kind of I knew what the bare minimum was to have everybody happy with me, and then I do that. But you find out once you get out of that environment, that's not necessarily good enough. So I didn't want the criticism of me to be I didn't work hard. I'd rather someone has a criticism of my skill set or my capability than what I'm willing to put in. And I don't recommend that for everybody, because part of sports can be a bit exploitative, because people want to work in sports, and
Yeah.
it can be a bit of a ringer that way. But that was kind of my rationale at the time, and I think it is kind of where I cultivated the work ethic I have now, that I probably didn't have beforehand, and I think that's what really served me well. And I know if there's one kind of piece that I would take from that to use as a piece of advice, it would be say yes to some stuff. Like, even it doesn't necessarily need to stretch you to that capacity, but I do think we'll have a lot of time to say no later when we have a good handle on what our priorities are. But I listened to it. I don't remember what show I was listening to. I was listening to a different podcast recently, and someone said that the best advice they ever got was say yes to everything until you're 40, and then 40 only say no. And I don't do that exactly, but I'm glad I did say yes to everything when I did, because it was a really good insight into what worked for me, what didn't, and kind of set me on a better path.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And yes, it's still very interesting to think about, right? I just trying to wrap my mind around that schedule and kind of everything
It's
like that. But
it's the dumbest thing ever. I can get you a couple friends' phone numbers, and they can tell you what they think of what I did.
yeah. No, but like, even what you're saying, just in regards to like the high school aspect, I can kind of relate to that, right? Where we're like, oh, like, I don't need to study or, homework and all that stuff, because I'll still get a 70, 80, etc. So you're fine. But looking back on that, right, once I got to university and then even after graduating, you're like, hey, maybe it would have been good even just to kind of build that habit, right? Where I was talking to my little cousin once, I was like, hey, like, maybe you should try doing this, or like just, hunker down on this a bit more, because at the time, like, this is pointless. But I think more so just what was it, the work ethic that we kind of put into you, rather than getting hit by a train in university when you had all these different projects come your way. Like, oh wow, like now I actually have to do it, but then I'm like learning, how to do it all, or put that much effort into a school project. So I can definitely relate to that. And I guess before we kind of get into your current role and then wrapping it up a bit, but maybe touching on what it was like working with NHL teams, especially on the social account, right? Where you touch on how there's a shelf life on it, but do you mind maybe getting to your experiences a bit more and what's that like? And because I'm sure that's a position, right? Especially with the way social media is now and all the digital world, everyone's like, hey, it would be a dream to work for social media in pro sports, but maybe you can shine some light on it.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing I'd say is it's infinitely more complex now than it was when I did it. When I did it, we started with just Twitter and Facebook, and people were still on Facebook, and it was a viable product for us. And then Instagram got layered in, and then you fast forward a few years, and all of a sudden there's a Snapchat, and now obviously TikTok is where everybody's trying to make their hay, and you see it a bit in LinkedIn too, when on more the kind of corporate initiatives. I think it was a really interesting role because you are on call all the time. I can think back to a couple times where teams on the West Coast, we make a trade at what amounts to 2 a.m. in Ontario, and you get a call, and you got to be ready to hop on and do that. And there's just always something. So it can be really challenging to switch off, but at the same time, there is a part of it where I never felt any burnout or fatigue or frustration on game day when I sat down and the music's going and the two teams are out for warm up and all that. So, you get exposed to a lot of really great stuff. You meet a lot of tremendous people. People in sport that you meet are the people like you listening to this show now, where they all just want to do this because they love this thing and they all have a story. It's very rare you meet somebody in this world where they thought about working at an accounting firm and they just kind of found their way in pro sport. Most people are very deliberate when it comes to working in sports. So you just meet the most wonderful people, and I always really enjoyed being around teams, coaches, management, so on and so forth. I think you just meet so many great people, and it's a really diverse work experience in that no 2 days are the same. You might have a schedule for that day where practice is this time, and then you have this community event, whatever, but there's always a million other things that kind of come up, and you're forced to kind of read and react and problem solve on the fly, and that type of thing. And I think that's really what adds to the novelty and the fun of the job is, it's you never know what's around the corner, and that's not for everybody, to be honest with you. But for me, it really added a lot to the experience, because there was always no 2 days felt the same, and you kind of break up them. You get less of the office space vibe where it's someone's got a case of the Mondays and whatever. It's there's difficult stretches for sure. My sport, we've 82 game seasons plus playoffs. That's a long year, and then you factor in major events like the draft and All-Star and training camp and prospect camp and so on and so forth. But that novelty day to day definitely helps sustain you when you're in the depths of February and it's a 7:30 puck drop against a team you don't really have an opinion on. It's not everything's Saturday night against your biggest rival on national TV. So it's I think it's just a really interesting way to kind of get a wide range of experiences and have some fun doing something you like.
Yeah. And I guess kind of moving on from that, and you touched on your time with the Senators, the Maple Leafs, and now with yourself at Queens Athletics. What is that role like? Obviously, it's a change, and obviously you're taking on more of a marketing communications role as well. What does that look like for those listening?
Yeah, it's in a lot of ways it's really similar. We are a big department at the university itself isn't terribly large, but we get a lot done. I'd say pound for pound, we get as much done as anybody else in the country. My portfolio extends to a number of things. So My team is responsible for our communications. It's in the name. Our partnerships, which includes corporate sponsorship, but also working with community grassroots groups and other groups on campus. Our visual identity. So we do social media graphics, but we also design jerseys and do things like that. And then obviously kind of tangentially related to the communications piece includes digital content and things like that. So what you would see if you were to punch in our accounts into Instagram or what have you. So, it's a wide ranging thing. And here we also have the balance of, we have the athletics piece, but we also have the recreation piece, and we need to service both. So, within athletics, we have 39 teams and clubs that all compete for the school in various sports and in various leagues. And then, on the recreation side, we service the campus and the broader Kingston community with our athletic facilities. So, that makes making sure. So you're marketing, a football game on a Saturday or a basketball game on a Friday, but you're also marketing, personal training and fitness classes and, swimming lessons. So it's a really wide array of things that you kind of have to account for and be prepared for. And, universities are extremely vibrant and there's always a lot going on. So you're also accounting for how we fit into, bigger departments across campus and this and that. And yeah, it's a challenging job for sure. I'm also, responsible for people and, need to make sure I'm doing my part to cultivate an environment and a culture where everybody wants to come back to work the next day and have a good time. And, people are picking each other up, but it's great fun. And, we have a great team. I think they do tremendous work, and I basically just try to, stay out of everybody's way and absorb all the not fun stuff to let the team cook and do their great work. So, I think the most rewarding part of this is, you get to meet a lot of really great people, whether that's, coaches or student athletes or students from around campus who work, we have 1,000 part-time student jobs in our department.
Wow.
So you meet a lot of different people and they're all kind of on different parts of their path. And some of them are doing this to make some money. While they're a student, some of them are doing it because they want to work in sport like you do. So, it's a lot going on, but we have a good time with it, and I think we do good work, and I'm enjoying the process so far.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Crazy to think of 1,000, but it makes sense when you think of it just in regards to the sheer size and even just intramurals as a whole, right? How many people participate in that?
Absolutely.
No, that's amazing. I guess to wrap up the podcast, I always kind of like to ask two questions. Obviously, we went over your whole route, which was fantastic. I want to fast forward now to an older version of you, Chris, because I myself, Chris, envision myself living to 103 and be on the rocking chair from my grandma's house, just thinking back to my career and be like, hey, those are some cool times. Can't believe I was able to do that as a career. So positioning that to you, you're 103, you're on a rocking chair. Is there one moment to date that stands out to you of, wow, I couldn't believe I got to do that for a job?
I think, just my time, if I can bunch it all together, I think my time with the Maple Leafs is probably what I'd call out. It was just so many amazing people that I had the opportunity to spend time with and get to know, and people, I consider, at the end of the day, lifelong friends. And, I tried to save as much as I could when I left or over the course of my time there, because I knew, everything kind of has a fixed expiry date. And, so as many credentials or t-shirts or whatever, any little kind of mementos I could keep, I did, and they're in a bin in my basement. And the reason I did that is not because I'm a hoarder, but because, when just, knowing I wanted to have a family and kids, grandkids, and the like, I wanted to eventually have something I could point to and say, your old man was cool at one point. Like, I did the thing that everybody wanted to do and everybody asked me about. So I think, just just thinking about that time, I still get romantic about it. It was very difficult to leave. It was, yeah, I think it was time, but you're never quite sure when you walk out of those doors, because it's such a special place with so many awesome people, and just thinking about the era in team history that I was privy to, and the number of milestones, and the opportunity I think they're going to cash in at some point here in the near future. um, I think I'll be really proud to say, I had a front row seat to that for a long time, and you know, I hope they look back on my time fondly as well. But I know I will definitely be talking about that for a long, long time.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's amazing. Definitely, I can agree with that. Where just trying to find anything to make yourself even cool in the future one day, hopefully. But that's an awesome story. And I guess the last question I have is now going back into the future, right? So going to 18-year-old Chris, who was at Queen studying, being becoming a hopeful lawyer one day. What's one piece of advice that you've learned throughout this route so far that you would like to share with a younger version of yourself or somebody listening, or anything that you were like, hey, this would be something great to know when I was 18 again?
That's a good question, and one I've given a lot of thought to, because I like playing that game with myself. I think, the one thing that I would stress to people is you probably like learning, but you might not like it in a school context. Like, I know by the time I left university, I was pretty tired of doing the class thing and having no money and yada yada yada. But as I got older and kind of affirmed, or got to know myself better and what made me tick, I realized how much I really like learning and trying to figure things out. And someone in the world has solved the problem that you're working on, whoever it is. And with enough, you read enough books, listen to enough podcasts, you watch enough TED Talks, et cetera, that all goes in the bank account. You're going to get the compound interest from that over the course of time. And I think it's I can't remember who I'm stealing this from, but it might be Ryan Holiday. I know he talks a lot about, like, always buy a book, because for $20 you can have something that changes your life, changes your way of thinking, sticks with you forever. And that's kind of how that's been a really, that's a thought that really resonated with me and continues to resonate with me. And every time I, fire up a podcast that looks unfamiliar, or buy a book that looks interesting in an old bookstore, something like that, I do it with the rationale that, this is going to help me somewhere down the road. And I don't know if it'll come up yet, but it'll come up eventually. So, I think, just to distill that a little bit into something kind of grabby, is just add as much to your toolbox as you can. If there's parts of the job or parts of a future that interest you, double down on that as much as you can, and try and learn as much as you can about it, because that will pay dividends, whether it's in your day-to-day work or a job interview setting where you have to kind of demonstrate that you know what you're talking about. It's gonna help you. So I think just adding as much to that toolkit as you can will go a long way for you. And it doesn't have to be a formal curriculum handed to you by a teacher or professor. You can do it on your own and kind of chase your interests.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of a great way to kind of end it, right? Where I absolutely agree with that. Where I have a memory of that where I started my business. I had a problem for 2-3 months. I was like, hey, like, can never find the right solution to it. And I just went for a beer with someone who messaged me on LinkedIn. I was like, yeah, sure, let's meet up. Let's have a drink. And they're just talking about what they do for work. And in passing, they said something about their day to day. And I was like, wait, what did you say? And they told me the tool they were using. I was like, that's exactly it. And then that made, whatever that problem was, that much easier. So yeah, you never know. Like you're saying, a book, $20 can change your life, or a conversation, a podcast. Absolutely agree with that, because you never know where it's going to come around the corner. So yeah, that's fantastic.
Well, and there's another line I meant to sneak in there as I got going and kind of moved on to the next thought. But someone said to me a while back, and it was in a setting where we were talking to high schoolers, and he said, "Don't chase your passion, chase your curiosity, because a passion can get stale, but something you're curious about, you're either going to solve what you're curious about, or you're going to become more curious about it. So it's a more fulfilling pursuit, and I really like that a lot.
Yeah, I know. That's super interesting. Just making me think about it, some things myself. But no, I love that. And to be honest, I think that's why I like asking that question at the very end, right? Just makes you reflect on everything that was shared today. But Chris, thank you so much for joining me on the route. And unless there's anything else, yeah, this was a great episode.
No, this was, I appreciate the time. I appreciate you reaching out. And if anyone listening has questions, hit me up. I'm happy to chat with you. Pay it forward, like I said.
Perfect. Well, that's it for episode 117. And thank you all for listening, and tune in again next week.